Good evening. Welcome to Street Talk. Well, tonight I have some very special guests. And as I like to say, we do Street Talk because it's a mission-based show. And there are a lot of people that cross your path through your journey in life where you realize that you have so much in common with them. And you never know this until you actually meet them. So tonight, I want to talk about something that's extremely important for my community down in Milford. I have Donna Cimarelli and Joan Goldstein. See, I actually got the names right. And they are from the Maren Sanchez Home Foundation. And I know for me, this is very pertinent to me. I obviously I work over in Devon. I go past Jonathan Law High School every day, and I remember the day that this happened. I couldn't tell you the month or or the time, but I remember because I remember seeing my senator being out in front of the school and everything that happened after that. And this is a very difficult topic. Obviously, Donna's daughter Maren was murdered in the school, and I don't say that lightly. I don't say killed. She was murdered, and really, this is about how do you get past that, and how has it affected your community? But more important, it's about how do you move forward. And how do you embrace those things? And I know I'm going to make Donna cry here, and that's okay.
Oh, no. I can do my best not to do that.
But you know what? I never got to meet Donna. I never got to meet Maren. I've been to the festivals, and I've seen the spirit of the people that have been around her. Who was your daughter, first of all? Because I think that's the most important part of this. Who was Maren?
Well, I want to say this and not sound cocky when I say this, but
No.
if you've met me, you've kind of met Maren. I was Maren at her age, and she was becoming somewhat like me. Very similar personalities. She was a very, very responsible young girl. She was very concerned about being really compassionate and empathetic toward people. She really was born with that. She was one of those type of people that if she always rooted for the underdog, she always wanted to make sure that the person that was either being made fun of or was left out was always included. So that's her spirit and her vibe that still continues. And we've tried to really make that spirit continue through the Maren Sanchez Home Foundation. We really want people to understand that kindness is something that you really need in life, but you also need a balance into learning how to be able to protect yourself. And so that's kind of like, that's basically, Maren's soul is a very big part of why I do what I do, and also the reason why the community responded the way the community responded after Maren was murdered, because she connected on so many levels with so many different types of people, that it was really hard for people to wrap their brain around the fact that that could actually happen to Maren, because she had put so many threads out to so many different people that the community fell because of the connections that she had made with people.
It reminds me, and I know I did something unusual here. I don't usually meet with my kids before I have them come on a TV show.
It feels so special.
I know that sounds strange because I usually have the discussion with them like beforehand. So it's all very kind of fresh in my head. But I wanted to give some respect, obviously, to you. Over knowing where the boundaries were with certain things, because it is. I mean, it brings tears to your eyes, and we all have boundaries on certain things. And I know our ones here are just the legal aspects of it. But you know, I know we talked about this when I was a kid growing up in the 70s. These are the things that you didn't worry or you didn't think about having to worry about back in those days. And I almost feel like I think bad things happen to people all throughout time. I mean, quite obviously. But I think because we're in such a social media and there's such an explosion and you can get so much information from so many different places, that it makes people feel more fearful. And I know that that was something that you didn't worry about with your daughter. She, like as you said, she was an adult, and I know to have that happen when you don't think of these things. I know that that's why you wanted to create this foundation, was to make sure that people realize that it's not just physical abuse that you have to deal with. Mm-hmm. It's psychological abuse. And I remember my teenage years pretty clearly. I guess I'm a little weird like that.
I remember most of them.
I remember some of them, right? Not all.
There's some parts that are
There's some flashes within there.
Yeah.
But that's what you guys are about. Now, I know you've taken the spirit of your daughter and try to lay what the groundwork for this to be able to help other people, because I think out of everything that people go through, if you can't find a way to turn what you have inside of here after a tragic situation and make it something good, then it just goes inward, and it doesn't leave you in a good place.
And I mean, I firmly believe in my beliefs that people come to this earth for a reason. And they also leave for a reason. And that's not easy to say when it's your daughter. But the fact of the matter is that sometimes the jobs are short and sometimes they're a little longer. And I was never the type of person that would ever run a foundation. I wasn't even the type of person that would volunteer for a foundation. Seriously, I was too busy raising Maren, single mom, really worried about how the bills were going to get paid. My extracurriculum help out there was non-existent. I just had good friends and had good times, but I wasn't that type of person that said, well, what am I going to do on Sunday morning? I'm going to go to the food bank and help. Mm-hmm. I just didn't do that. So for this to become my life now, I am 100% sure that this is how my life was supposed to be. And then on top of it, I become surrounded with the most incredible people, Joan being one of them, you know, just completely passionate, completely sold out to the cause, finding that connection within themselves that are connecting to the foundation. And I think what we really want to do is we want to tell kids and parents that there are red flags and warning signs that we miss every single day. There are warning signs that I missed. There are red flags that I saw. And I just kind of brushed it off too much when it was really inside telling me this isn't right. But when you're a parent and you're juggling stuff and your child seems to be physically fine, you don't really think that those are the things that could lead to a tragedy. But that's one of the big reasons why this foundation was formed, because I want people to know that when you see red flags, which we call pre-incident indicators, they're real. And anyone that's ever murdered someone, there's been many, many red flags before the tragedies happened.
Now, I know any foundation that you have, in order to be able to get the message out, I hate to say it in this way, you have to be able to raise money in order to be able to put out the mailers, to be able to produce, the products, and to really get towards the community. And I know I want to get this out early so that people know about this. I know originally there was the Day of Maren, that they would have every year. I know I've been to every single one of them.
The festival.
Yep, the festival, which is it ended this year or has it come to an end?
The festival has come to an end this year because there was a small committee that ran it and they did a wonderful job, but it had just become a little bit overwhelming for them. And I'm not going to say we because it really wasn't my decision because I really didn't have a whole lot to do with it. What I did have to do with it is that I started the scholarship, that they then made a festival that would continue to fund the scholarship. The scholarship is still in existence. We're hoping to be able to spend that down soon and open our own scholarship with the Maren Sanchez Home Foundation. Okay. But the festival was a nice way for, especially the first year, because the festival was exactly to the date that Maren was killed. So it was very healing for her friends in the community. The kids had no idea what they were going to do that day, and this just filled them with, an unbelievable amount of joy, and they were all together, and they felt Maren's spirit strong there, and it was great. But it has come to an end now, and last year was our last year doing it, and now we're moving forward full throttle with the Maren Sanchez Home Foundation. And
so now you, Joan, I want to call you Janet.
You can call me anything you want, James, as long as I can answer your questions.
Joan, I'll call you Joan. Just don't call me Lou. Sorry, it's my private joke over here. You guys have a gala coming up, correct?
Yes. So this will be our second annual gala, and it's called the Magical Night in Havana. And it is going to be held on April 28th, and it will be at the Milford Yacht Club. And at this time, we have a very nice theme going. We have a Cuban theme, as people may not know, but Maren was Cuban, and we are trying to keep her spirit alive. Last year's gala was based on New Orleans, and that also had a lot of relevance to Maren, and Donna made a journey, a healing journey there. So we try to keep Maren as the common thread. Having this Cuban theme is really exciting for us, and also, we are learning so much about just the different, all the different types of parties they have, and they have their roasted pig and stuff, and that part of it is fun, but it's really ends up being a piece of Maren that we get to explore, and that's been really, being close to Donna, that's been really special for us, and then we get to share another piece of her with the world. So the gala is going to be very exciting. We have lots of ideas to make it a wonderful night, and a great night for fundraising, because this is the primary fundraiser that will fuel our foundation for the entire year. And we have lots of goals, and we have lots of classes that we want to hold. And this is where our primary source of funds comes from. So it's a very important night, and we make it a stellar night. Some of the things that we will be doing is we have a Cuban mystery box where you can purchase a box, and the prize, it's a $50 purchase, but the prize inside the box is going to be valued much more than that, and everyone will win a prize. So we're excited to offer that. We're going to have a 50-50 raffle, which is going to be fun. So half the money will go to the foundation and half will go to a guest that night. We are excited to state that we have a new car raffle going on. We don't know how that's going to play out and how we're going to, determine who will win that, but we're working on that right now, and that's very exciting for us. And there's just so many aspects. And again, the bigger piece of it is to create awareness, because we definitely have media will come and be involved. We'll have, we don't know who will be speaking this year, but we always have a politician there, because that's important to us, because we are linked to, our causes are linked to that, to politics, as is almost everything. So it's a really important night for us, and the planning is hot and heavy right now. And we got a lot of excitement, and we learned some from last year, and we are just really excited about showing the world a little bit more about Maren, and at the same time fueling our foundation for the next year.
And I know you're going to have table captains who are going to go out, but for the general public that might not know one of the table captains, is the information going to be up on your website that they could be able to purchase tickets?
Well, the information will be up, but this year, because we did it differently,
Sure.
we're going to have so many table captains that at the end of it, we may only have just a handful of tickets we're going to be able to sell.
Okay.
So we don't know how that's going to work out yet. We're really it's trial and error this year, but I have a feeling, well, let's put it this way. Last year we had to unfortunately turn away 30 people in the last week. So I'm just thinking that this year we're probably going to be following suit with the same situation, which is not a bad situation to have. We're pretty happy about that. But we definitely are asking for sponsorship and donors because that is really the way we could put on a good gala, is to just really have the support from the community and the local businesses. And as Joan had mentioned, we are going to be advertising. We're going to have a beautiful program with all business names in it. We're going to have a sheet for the magic boxes of everyone that's donated for a prize. So we're going to we really try to make it a win-win situation by promoting everybody that has given back to us. So we hope that we'll get a lot of sponsorships this year.
One of the things that we have found interesting is that in the beginning, the Milford community just really just jumped on the cause, and they were very helpful with the sponsorships. And I mean, everyone in Milford wanted to do something. And what we're watching is it grow by counties. And we're seeing it's somewhat magical. So our sponsorships, we're hoping to see a little bit more from outside Fairfield County a little bit, and that's been happening. But we definitely are looking to continue that, because as we grow, we are creating just awareness, and we want to cover the state, and then we want to move on. We want to start moving on and create awareness.
It's like it's the ripple effect.
It's a ripple.
You throw a stone in the middle of a pond, and it concentrically gets bigger and bigger over time. And I think, when we talk about this, people go through these tragedies. They are. I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, we're right around the corner from Sandy Hook. Obviously, I lived in Sandy Hook. You've been in Monroe. These are all things that are very close to this circle of the state. But I mean, again, I look on social media, or I look on the news, and there are other school shootings. There are other things. So it's not just the message within Connecticut. It's how do we teach people about this, and I know that's why you created the foundation. What do you guys do in the foundation now?
Well, the mission statement, for me, it was very clear what we were going to be doing with this foundation shortly after Maren passed, because it came from a conversation that I had with Maren. Maren had been being, I don't know the correct way to say this, but she had been being pursued through texts, and she had not wanted it. And I had watched her a few times receiving multiple texts where I could see her actually sighing and being physically shaken. And so at one point I had asked her what was going on, because it was just, she was sighing every time a text would come in. And I finally looked at her and I said, Maren, what is going on? And she said to me, it's Chris, who is the boy who murdered her. And I said, what does he want? And she said, Mom, he says he's going to hurt himself. And he said he's going to go off his medication. And I was not happy about that conversation, because I felt that she was being psychologically manipulated and emotionally manipulated. I didn't feel it, I knew it. And so I made that very clear to her at that moment. And what I said to her is, Maren, you need to tell him to stop, and you need him to stop immediately, or else I'm going to be going to his parents' house, because he is psychologically manipulating her. And her words will forever be in my head, because she said to me, no, he's not, Mom. because she didn't know what it meant. Because she thought that if I was using the word manipulation, it must mean because he must be touching her, grabbing her, pushing her. And so I knew that I needed to have that as part of my mission statement because, and we are talking about young women here. Mm-hmm. I am fully, I understand that young boys get psychologically manipulated all the time. But the majority of young women, they get psychologically manipulated and then killed, are skyrocketing around the United States. And I really feel like when that starts playing a part in your situation or your relationship with a friend or a lover, that is the precursor of something really bad to come. And this was beginning to happen with her. But again, I didn't take it as serious as I should have because I was just thinking, it's a boy who's lovesick. Mm-hmm. She has to tell him no about 3 or 4 times, and then he'll move on. That was the whole, I didn't think anything else of that except that I was upset because I didn't like what he was doing to her. And the reason why I didn't like what he was doing to her is because Maren was really kind. Mm-hmm. She wasn't the type of girl that would flip him off and tell him to go find somebody else. She was the kind that would take that problem and try to help him. And we all see how that turned out. So my main thing with the foundation is to teach young women the warning signs of when you're in a situation and you're feeling uncomfortable and your word no is not being heard. How do we make this a break at the beginning of you feeling this way so that you don't carry on at something dysfunctional and then when you try to break it, you get killed? And I think this is when we go into high schools and colleges, we're bringing a lot of self-defense, physical self-defense to them. Mm-hmm. But my main goal is to make our her self-awareness class the big deal. Because if you can raise awareness about these topics, hopefully you'll never have to get to the point where you'll need to know physical self-defense. Because you have already stopped it from happening. Now, I'm not saying that every girl should know how to defend herself. But I think that they can learn how to defend themselves physically, but they never think about their emotional side and their psychological side and how worn down and tattered that gets when someone is basically grooming you and preying on you and you don't even know it.
One of the other things I think is that Maren, who I did not I did not meet Maren, but as Donna mentioned before, I tell her all the time, I just can't believe I never met her. Because I do feel like she's so alive in my life, and she's such relevance in my life. And Donna says, you have met her, you've met her. You know exactly who she is, and I am hopeful that I do. But one of the things I think that got Maren a little bit in trouble is that she was so socially mature that we gave her a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, that she had things under control. And she was unaware that feeling in your gut, because she had that feeling, that sigh was the feeling, that was her gut. And she, instead of paying attention to how it made her feel, she was focusing on how do I fix him, and how do I, and one of the awareness, the Her Self-Awareness program, we have several, we say tools in our tool belt, and one of them is the Her Self-Defense, and that is a course that teaches basic self-defense so that you can build confidence. And if it's just to, it may not be, it's the physical part that you can get away from, hopefully get away from. But the psychological part just slipped right under without anybody really seeing it. And the gut, we're learning now because we as a foundation are doing the research to try to understand so that when we speak to people, we give them the scientific piece of it. And the gut does have sensors that will, just like your brain, tell you something's off.
Believe it or not, in your gut, you have the same neurotransmitters that you have in your brain. So you talk about, I feel it like in my gut.
Yeah.
It is.
It's not just a saying.
It's
a biological reaction.
It is the same.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that's one piece that we all kind of miss. And now that we know that there's science behind it, you go into a school and you explain that, and people are a little more receptive. The children specifically are receptive to it.
Well, the other part, and I know this from dealing with justice issues and brain injury issues, that's really important for parents to realize, is that your brain's not fully developed until you're 26 years old.
You got it.
Which is so crazy.
And which is why, you know, you look at like the teenage years and you're like, how the hell am I going to make it through this?
That's why you shouldn't get married till 27.
Yeah, exactly.
and you look at kids and teenagers, and really it's the connection up to your frontal lobes is not fully developed. And that's why they have things like, you see, like your insurance rates all of a sudden drop down
when they get to that age.
When they get to that age. But what it talks about, and what's really important here, is I call it like the indestructible feeling that kids have. They don't understand the consequences of what could happen with them. They take needless risks. Mm-hmm. They don't have that level of emotional control. Part of your frontal lobes, it also deals with how you interpret social cues.
Yes.
With things, and that's really one of the things that, and I know, like I work with people with brain injury that have like frontal lobe issues, and it's almost like I have to be their judgment for them.
You see the disconnect.
And and you get to see the disconnect, and that disconnect is somewhat similar to what teenagers go. Now, take it for granted, everybody is on a spectrum, so some people are more mature than others, but it doesn't necessarily make you think that you can look at them and say, oh, they're adults.
No, and I think that's what Joan hit on, which I'm really glad you did. So that was a big problem with Maren. She was so unbelievably responsible that I let her handle a lot of stuff because she seemed not needy. Mm-hmm. Where another parent would have been completely into this, was like, what did he say? What exactly did he say on that text? But I didn't. I just said, tell him to stop. I have friends that are parents that would have dug way deeper into that because their kids just weren't that mature. Mm-hmm. But I was like, Maren's got this. She always got it.
And she
really didn't. But she really didn't. Because like what you're saying, she wasn't mature enough to deal with somebody who was psychologically manipulating her.
No one is.
Because she felt no one could ever do that. I couldn't do that. Why would anybody want to do that to me? And the fact of the matter is that it happened to me at 48 in a relationship. So those things can happen when you're smart, when you've been through the ropes. It really does catch you off guard. And when you find out that someone's doing that to you, it's a shocker every time. So I can't imagine being an adult having a hard time dealing with someone who maybe is not leaving you alone, or is potentially stalking you, or leaving gifts when you don't want them, or as an adult. I can't imagine what it must have felt like to Maren. To know that this was bothering her. She didn't even talk to her friends about it. She wanted to make sure that she didn't hurt his feelings and make people think he was dumb or stupid. Because one of her friends afterwards said to me, are you kidding me? Maren never mentioned anything? And she said, well, she mentioned something once about him asking her to the prom, but she asked me not to repeat it because she didn't want to hurt his feelings that she said no.
So some key warning signs that you've already thrown up for me while just sitting here talking about this, because I ran a residential treatment center. I dealt with people who were teenagers. I've dealt with people who have borderline personality disorder, and I've dealt with people who've had bipolar disorders. So some key things that always would strike a chord with me is if you saying them is, number one, the kid's on medication. I would be saying, okay, what kind of medication? Yeah. Because they're, you know, I mean, take it for granted, you know, the teenage years are difficult within themselves. I mean, there's also the emotional highs and lows. Hormones, everything else going on within that. We used to say that, you know, you couldn't really fully diagnose somebody until they're around 18 years old because your body's going through all these different chemical changes. But when I hear like medication, I would want to sit there and ask, what kind of medication? Are we talking an antidepressant medication, or are we talking about like a psychotropic?
Are you talking about in Maren's situation?
I'm talking about in general. In general,
because I, again, right, being a little jaded, and I don't care who hears me say this, I didn't care about his medication. I cared about what he was doing to my daughter.
Right.
And that, you're right, is what we need to start asking. We need to start asking, is he really on medication? Is he just saying that to get her attention, is what I thought was happening.
Yes.
But it's kind of like, do you have a gun in the house?
Yep.
You know, where is it? Is it loaded? Is it locked up? How many kids are going to be over? Is there alcohol in the house? I mean, those are important questions that I never thought to ask because I didn't grow up that way. And I, again, had such full confidence in Maren to mostly always do the right thing that it never occurred to me to ask those questions.
And Dominic, one of the important things that we're learning now is to like nip it like immediately, because it's the feed the kitty scenario, that as soon as you give anything out, the kitty comes back for more food. So if it's trying to teach these children to be strong with their first reaction, no. Like, I'm not even going to engage in this. And then we're trying to teach, which is very sensitive, how to shut that down without, like, because the first reaction to people like Maren, who's full of kindness, is, I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings. I don't want to get him angry, because we're fearful of those things. So instead of taking care of ourselves, we take care of them. And so we're trying to learn that not to get that engagement to start, so that you don't have that much invested, so that you don't feel bad about pulling back, or you're not worrying about their feelings, that you stopped it from the beginning, you took control, and then you stayed back and you watched.
And I always think too, if we could teach our young girls what Joan just said at like 10 and 11, we may stop so many marriages of domestic violence and murders, and because those warning signs were there well before the first punch happened, or well before the first rape happened, or well before, you know, someone was stalked for months and terrorized. There were signs that if they had been cut off immediately, there wouldn't have been time for the threads to grow. Because when the connections grow, especially with young boys that possibly may be disturbed, it could be a harder break if you've already created a relationship.
Well, what I like to call in behavioral terms is what we call like an extinction curve.
Yeah.
And what I mean by like an extinction curve is it kind of goes up like this, all right? And if you cut it off right here, there's this amount of effort that you have to do in order to stay away from that.
Yes.
Whereas if you let that person keep on going all the way up to the top, then there's that much more that they're going to try to do in order to continue to get your attention.
That's actually something very helpful to add into our...
and we do this like with behaviors, because a lot of times what we would do is with some of the behavior modification that we do is we do what we call planned ignoring. And I could teach you some of the easy like techniques of what you can do in a situation like that. But when somebody would exhibit that behavior, you would like completely ignore them, and they would continue on depending upon if you like broke down and gave into
There's
them
a threshold.
gave it into their attention.
And then it goes a little further, and then it goes a little further.
So I mean, but they're you know, you're talking about like, how do you ignore somebody?
Well, I mean, like when we did the class,
it's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable, but like when we did the class, so we work very closely with a book called The Gift of Fear, and the gentleman Gavin DeBecker, who wrote the book, talks about all of these pre-incident indicators, and he also talks about if you tell someone that you don't want to talk to them, but you answer 10 of their texts, you talk to them 10 more times when you already told them that you didn't want to.
Right.
And that comes right back to the no is no. It's very difficult for girls to hear that. Because in our society, no is not no for a girl. No is, well, maybe. No is, well, I don't know, let me think about it. No is like, well, I don't know, maybe after work. When the no is what she really wants to say and stick to it, boys have a much easier time saying no and meaning it. And I think that with the extinction curve and that repetition of asking over and over and over until they break you down. Those are the things. That is the beginning baseline of what I want the girls to learn. Because if they learn that, even if we have to role play it, if they learn that, they're going to be more confident that their no is really a complete sentence.
And one of the things that, again, we do focus on young women, but we had the opportunity to go into Trumbull High School, which is a local high school, and as part of a, they called it the senior seminar, Donna and Joan Goldstein
Mm-hmm.
had gone in and presented to classrooms of maybe 20,
Senior,
20,
yeah.
they were like 20 at a time, and it was mixed, co-ed, and I think we did see value in the boys hearing some things that they do that maybe would be looked at as maybe a little too aggressive, or so in some ways, even though we're trying to teach the full picture, I'm sure both the boys and the girls in the classroom that day were thinking, wow, when I sent that third text, I shouldn't have. And so it's not just about creating awareness about what you're receiving, it's also about what you're giving out.
And
because
also some of our boys were a little upset that it had happened to them as well.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things we saw was a lot of the boys speaking up.
Yeah.
And saying, they were right on board. And we were happy because there's been times in the last year where even though we're focusing and we're trying to create a program for young girls, we have time and time again said, but we got to get to the boys somehow. We just don't know how we're going to do that yet, because they deserve this as well. This is a co-ed situation, and it's an overall education. We all know that the harassment can come from either sex. I mean, we know that. So, but again, because of our foundation and because of Maren, our focus is young women.
And also our focus is on the bystander. Because I had so many kids fill my home in the last 3 years who were bystanders to Maren's murder. And my heart broke more for them than for me, because they lost 2 friends that day. And I can't imagine what it must have been like to have one of your friends kill one of your other friends. And they were all living in like a universe that they didn't plan on living on. And I know that a lot of them saw things, heard things, felt things that they knew just weren't right. But they didn't know what to do with that information. And they have to live with it every day, even though anything they would have said or done most likely would not have prevented Maren's murder. But how about if it did? And they have to live with the fact that they heard crazy things being said about Maren, or they possibly might have known that this boy was coming to school with a knife. These are the things that they have to live with.
Survivor's guilt.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we need to get to them so that we can stop being bystanders. We don't want any kid to have to live with being a bystander. So if we can inform them on, here's the dangerous things that you might hear, or what hits your gut that doesn't sound right about this situation, and what would you do if you heard someone say that?
And I think some of those signs are somebody, and you said it before, self-injurious.
Yes.
Threatening to injure or hurt themselves. Threatening to kill themselves.
That's a big one.
One of the other like huge ones that I know are like how they treat animals. If they're aggressive towards animals, I mean, that's like right there. That's like a huge sign that there's definitely something wrong there. And I don't want to put it in the perspective of, you know what, we look at this as, if you can help somebody to get the right kind of treatment, or be able to say something to the right person to be able to get them to that point. Maybe their parents aren't aware of these things. Maybe they don't know, or they don't see that these things are going on. because teenagers, you know, it's kind of like the old story of, oh yeah, I write everything down in my journal, but you know, if you go in and take a look at my journal, you know, it's an invasion of privacy. They think that they're indestructible.
I was lax. I mean, Maren used to play the guitar in her room almost every night. She was learning a new song. And then there was like a month when there was no music. And I remember thinking, if she doesn't pick up that guitar soon, I'm going to go have a talk with her. And then one day, the music was back. And I was like, she's fine. But I'm wondering, what happened in that month? What was going on? Because when the music dies, something's happening. And I really, so many times, was going to say to her, where's the music? And then she would have been like, and then I could have, but I never dove in it with her, ever. I always let her come out of her own funk by herself. I guess because I was used to doing that, you know? And again, warning signs.
But
Parents.
even, you know, parents don't know. Like, we put it through like a colander as well, and we only shake out our knowledge. Like, we only see what we experienced and what we grew up with. And the educators and you know, even in the schools, like, you still don't ever believe it's going to happen in your school.
No.
You just don't believe it. We're starting to believe it. But the same thing, like, we all have to learn another level now and take it up a notch. And even on the way here, it was like so bizarre. I'm listening to the radio, and we have the Police, I'll Be Watching You, which is a really creepy.
It's a stalker song.
Creepy song.
It's my favorite song.
Right. Okay. And guess the next song was Paparazzi to, you know, Gaga, which, you know, I love Gaga, and so no disrespect to Gaga. But, like, those two songs, and I'm singing along to Stalking. I'm singing along. I know the words, but it's not impacting my brain that, wow, this is creepy.
Really, that music was to raise awareness.
Right.
Right?
Well,
but I know what you're saying.
Well,
it's like,
actually, I'll be. That's about his ex-wife.
Did you have to just go throw water on the fire?
Sorry, didn't mean to do that. But you know what?
But it does raise awareness when you hear it, though.
It's the important fact, and I think, you know, not only for teenagers, and obviously as we go through like this season, I want to talk about, like, you know, women's issues, because I think this is obviously so much that has come into awareness. You know, I deal with this with my wife. She has people you know, who make her feel uncomfortable. She knows enough to have the discussion with me, and I know enough to know that when I hear that in her voice, or, like, you know, she's like, can you come? I'm going to be there. And, you know, I let her pick and choose those moments, because I'm not overstepping a bound, but it's a communication that we have.
Yes.
It's not something that, you know, I'm clueless about, or I don't know about. We talk about it on a regular basis. I mean, I'm not going to go out in there and beat the shit out of people.
Right.
Excuse my language.
Right,
I don't usually say that.
But you're aware.
But we have the conversation, and we're aware. It's the communication.
Yeah.
Is really is the key part.
Well, I'll tell you, you know, there was a couple of things that happened with Maren. Again, right? It wasn't penetrating the way I so wish it would have. I picked her up from school one day. She got in the car, and we're driving out of the parking lot, and there's a whole group of boys kind of bouncing toward us. You know how they're all walking like in a group? And she just did this. She said, oh, God, there he is. And I went, who? And she went, Chris. And now she's like ducking. So I go to her, which one is he? Because I had no patience for this. You know, I really didn't. And I said, which one is he? And so she pointed, and I remember going, oh. That's all I remember. And I remember driving home. I never said, why did you duck? Are you intimidated? Because I just figured he was just annoying her, and it was just better for her not to be seen. I was assuming. But how did I know? How do I know that he wasn't at her locker every single morning making her feel uncomfortable? I don't know that, and I'll tell you why I don't know that. Because I didn't ask. And there was the communication breakdown. Because if I had said, what exactly is happening to make you hide?
I think it's because we always want to think the best, and we don't always want to take a look and think that something like that can happen to you, and
not at the intensity that it did.
Yeah.
None of us in our wildest dreams could ever even imagine that her hiding like that, and she could be gone in another month. I mean, that's just, your brain can't consume something like that. I just felt, she'll get over this. He'll get over that. Like, literally.
It's like teenage angst.
And of course, we don't want everybody out there to hear this and say, well, this boy looked at my daughter the wrong way, so he's going to kill her. I mean, we don't want to do that either.
We don't want to live a fearful life. We want to live an aware life.
Well, I like to say, and I remember listening to this thing on NPR, and it was really quite interesting. And it was talking about people who are murderers who have like this kind of like profile. And almost like a genetic type of like DNA type of thing, and but in order to flip that switch, you have to almost have been through some level of trauma yourself, yeah. And you know, there are personality types out there, you know, that are similar. Like I said, you have the people that like with the way that they treat animals when they're younger and other things along those lines. But it's usually they've been through some level of trauma themselves that has turned that switch on. So, I mean, it's to take a bigger look at the bigger picture of, you know, recognizing those things, but also recognizing them for, like you said, you know what, there's that fearfulness of being able to go up and say something. It's the who do I go tell this to?
Who do I tell?
And if I don't get an answer back from them, who do I go to next?
And does it get to the level that I should be saying anything?
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't know, am I going to say something? When we grew up, everybody, I don't know about you, but everybody went to school with every guy had a buck knife hanging off his belt. We would have never even thought that we had to go tell someone that somebody had a knife in 1980 in high school. But now, I don't know, if someone has a knife, that's probably a good sign that you need to go tell somebody something. But if they say something.
Well, I even had to have the discussion with my son because, you know, at 7 years old, you know, he would get very frustrated at stuff, and he would see like on TV, and he'd say like, you know, I'm going to blow things up, or I'm going to do this, and we had to explain to him, look, people are going to treat you seriously if you say those kind of things.
A long time ago, no one would have even blinked.
Right. A long time ago, we would have all been out there with, you know, guns and M80s, blowing up the toilets. I didn't do that. Sorry. but that's where times are different, and
We're post 9/11.
We are.
Things are different. Our kids will never know what it was like to be that lax with stuff, with words.
No,
with words.
You won't.
Yeah.
You won't. And I know. I mean, I remember the day that 9/11 happened. I talked to my brother because I thought he was on a plane going down to D.C. that day, and we said, you know what? It's all going to be different. You're not going to be a bystander to something like that. You would have done the same thing that they did in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But that's the same thing that we have to be able to get across to like our kids. You can't just be a bystander. Here are the consequences that can happen.
Yeah.
Well, that's why like the book that we work with it's the gift of fear, because it is a gift if we know how to process it. Because it's giving us the signs of when to say no. But there is a balance on how to, you know, you can learn which is good fear and which is bad fear. There are ways to differentiate between the two, because we don't want all these, you know, young people walking around fearful and being like looking at everybody as a problem. But yet we need to hone in, and we need to get these skills like polished, so that they, you know, that there is no mistake of that this is the good fear and this is kind of the ridiculous fear, you know. And there is, it's a lesson. You have to teach it. Yeah.
Well, as I like to say, my partner, Father Russ, he's ex-organized crime, And whenever we go in a restaurant, I like to make him feel slightly uncomfortable. So I'll take the seat that I know that he's normally going to take.
Which is the door seat,
and,
right?
and it's the one where
He's looking at the door.
He can see the door. Where he can see where like his exit out is. But those are strategies.
Know your exits.
Yeah, those are strategies that you know what you can do. Just like, I know dealing with people with mental illnesses, we learn physical restraint techniques.
Yes.
Well, not to necessarily restrain somebody. How do you push somebody away where you can get away from them and be able to make your escape, or knowing that you're not going to be in a closed-in space? I mean, these are all things. I mean, I learned later on in life, but if we can give these, like you said, the tools, and then more importantly, the confidence.
Well, that's what we teach in our her self-defense class.
I'm glad you said it.
And our main instructor is Nick Newell. He actually graduated from Jonathan Law. He's an MMA mixed martial arts champion, and he teaches our girls that the most important thing is to be able to make space and get away. We're not teaching them combat. We're teaching them to make space and get away. And I said this on another interview that we did. I'm not quite sure if Maren had those tools, if she would have been able to save her life, because it was so off guard and in such a compact, small area. But we're hoping that we can teach the girls the her self-awareness class, so that hopefully they'll never end up in the stairwell, because they would have already seen those signs months earlier and would have never entered into the area of danger. But if they do, or if they did, we hope that they have the tools to defend themselves and make space and get away.
One of the first things in the her self-defense course also is know your exits. So in that situation, it's just making you aware, but it also maybe it would make someone aware not to go into a small space or a closed space or a confined space.
With someone you're uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
And those little statements that we are very repetitive with in every class. Like every class is know your exits and create space. Look, we're not taking the guy down. We are creating space and getting out. And those are just key points that play over and over in our heads. And there are, like, we play it in our heads, so you have to assume when these girls leave the class, they are doing the same. And we go over it again at the end. What are you going to do? Going to know your exits. What are you going to do? You're going to, and it's important. You got to get the song in your head playing so that it's just normal.
And know that any person of any size is capable of doing that.
Absolutely.
I know,
Thank you for that.
One thing I used to do, like I said, we had to do physical restraints when people were like out of control. I used to do them with somebody who was like 4'9".
Yeah.
And I felt very comfortable with that, and she felt very comfortable with it. And so you got to realize that your size doesn't matter within that. You can do things in order to be able to protect yourself, or like you said, be able to get out of the situation at the time.
And we've been so fortunate because the people that call us the most are moms, because I think they relate to me on many levels, and they want their girls in these classes. The girls aren't even signing themselves up. Their moms are signing them up, and their moms are signing themselves up with their daughters, because they're like, they hear this story about Maren, and I have friends that are moms from Newtown. They're my inspiration. When I'm having a bad day, I just think of them, and I'm like, I can get through this. I can do this. Because I always think I had 10 more years with Maren than they had with their kids. And they really are my heroes. And I was telling you that for a reason. I brought up Newtown for a reason. But so the tragedy at Newtown was huge. And unfortunately, there are children that were gunned down that day that I don't even know their names. It was different with Maren. Maren was isolated. It was one. They wanted her. It wasn't a random act. And so I think that because of that, everybody knows who Maren is, because it was just that one name and that one isolated incident. And because it came out later that she actually was being stalked and she was being manipulated. And so we're having so many moms sign their girls up. And I'm so excited about that because they're bringing like girls that are 10 years old. And I think that's what we want. We want to teach them when they're 10 so that when they're 20.
And in the beginning, when we first started getting calls and say, well, is there an age limit on this group? And we're like, no. And then they would say, well, my daughter's 10. And we'd say, okay. Now we're like, yes. At first we were like, is this the appropriate age? And now we know it is the appropriate age. And
so we have 10-year-old and 50-year-olds in the same room. It's great.
I hate to stop this because I know our 55 minutes goes just like that.
That's good.
But I want you guys to come on again because you know what?
Okay.
Beyond this, you know, I want to talk about how you manage from your own perspective, how to deal with circumstances like this and trauma. And I know I'd love to have your wife come on because she does some stuff similar to what a friend of mine does with EMDR, eye movement desensitization. And I'd love to continue this conversation on.
Let's do it.
But for today, we got a gala coming up. We got the foundation.
We need sponsors.
And we need sponsors.
We need to fuel the next year.
I can't thank you guys enough for
Thank
coming
you.
on. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Dominic.
So
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Joan.
Really appreciate your time.
and with that, we can run the street.